This episode of the Bookish Rambles podcast contains some sensitive topics that you should be aware of, including mentions of sexual assault, PTSD, OCD, and eating disorders. There are also general mentions of sexual content, so if that is not your thing, just be aware. Hello and welcome to the Bookish Rambles podcast with me, Holly.
And me, Becky. Today we've got a special guest.
I'm Colleen Conklin, and I am a therapist and marketing girly by day and romance author by night, with my debut contemporary romance novel Ever Since New York coming out, I believe, when this podcast is airing. It is out now, which is super exciting. A little bit about the book. I'll share the blurb because it's not super long. Emmeline Levine is a rising pop star taking the world by storm with her childhood best friend, Kieran Hayes, her guitarist and co-writer by her side. With her quickly growing fame and success, Emmeline is learning how to navigate the complexities of the music industry while also recovering from an eating disorder and PTSD. Kieran has dreamed of being a professional musician ever since he first picked up a guitar. Now that he's living that dream, his lifelong struggle with OCD, along with his increasingly complicated feelings for Emmeline, is holding him back from reaching his full potential. Emmeline and Kieran have never been more than just friends, but one night in New York City changes everything.
So, as always, this is spoiler heavy. We are going to get really into it. Go read the book. It's definitely available everywhere because I've definitely seen it on Waterstones, for example. So absolutely go read it and then come back. Don't just listen. But yeah, and I guess the first thing that I wanted to talk about, because as you mentioned, you're a therapist, there is a lot of different mental health, well, I don't want to say issues, but different mental health realities, really, that you've written, and you've done it from the perspective of somebody who knows about these on a very intimate level. Yeah,
definitely. And it's something that gives me a unique perspective, which is also kind of part of the why behind writing this book, is that I, in addition to being a licensed mental health therapist, I also have lived experience with eating disorders, OCD, and PTSD. And also, aside from just my clients who I've worked with those conditions, also have some other close people in my life, like one of my brothers struggles with OCD, just a lot of people in my life who have experienced different mental health struggles, and also how I've met some of my very best friends has been through online mental health communities. And so it's definitely something I think that's unique, is me being able to combine that lived experience with my clinical knowledge from getting my master's in mental health counseling and all the, I guess it's been, actually this week is 5 years since I started seeing therapy clients back when I started my internship. So being able to combine those things has been really important to me, because I think a lot of times, not just in books, but especially in other types of media as well, often when there is mental health representation, it's done in a way that's either really dramatic or graphic for the sense of being graphic, not in a way that is relevant to really carrying out the story, or is just not in a fully accurate way. And it was something that was really important to me, especially because while I have read some books and I've seen some movies and shows and all that have represented mental health well, I feel like it's often not done well, and often is done for shock value. And I think was really cool for me to be able to channel combining those two things of that lived experience and clinical knowledge, so that I'm able to just represent it in a different way.
Yeah. And I do think as well, it's especially, as you've mentioned, there have been quite a few. I think there's a very famous book that a lot of people have accused of doing that, of basically exploiting trauma for a response from readers. I'm not going to say the name of it, but there was obviously, I remember when I was a teenager dealing with depression myself, that there was the big TV show at the time, 13 Reasons Why, which was very heavily criticized for doing exactly what you're not supposed to do. So it can be very dangerous when there is stuff that's done wrong, and obviously you would know that. And I think that from Becky and I's perspective, as well as authors ourselves who also write a lot of mental health stuff, it is really important, and it's really nice to see a book that deals with these issues in a way that is very well dealt with, sort of sensitively to them, you know? And I think as well the big thing is that you did have the trigger warnings at the beginning. And as well, this is a tangent, we'll get to this bit later, but I am asexual aromantic, so it was really appreciated that there was a spice content at the beginning. I just think you did like a really good job of making it easy and accessible for readers to actually be safe, shall we say, in their experience of this book, for people to be comfortable. So I really appreciated that. And I think, Becky, that was actually something as well that you mentioned, was that you really liked the mental health.
Yeah, because obviously, because it's such a big part of, well, like, I struggled as a teenager as well. And, like, it was really tough. So it's just nice to see that more books have decided to do it more in a mental health way. Especially as, I can't remember what I read, but I think I read a lot of John Green as a teenager. And I think, yeah, I think some of it's done well, but then some of it's not. So it's like, I think as obviously as we've grown up, and it's like, maybe I actually want to see more of this in a book, where it's like in other books it's like unheard of on books, say from books like, I don't know, 20 years ago, they would never dream of tackling like issues like this,
especially the eating disorder stuff. I feel like
that's a big one. Yeah,
even I remember, this isn't a book, but Glee, they did a whole arc of one of their characters having an eating disorder, and I feel like it was really badly handled. There are just so many really destructive portrayals, I think, of it, and you did it in a way that was very, as I said, like realistic, sort of grounded in reality, but it wasn't in a way that would necessarily trigger anyone and everyone who was reading it. Like, it obviously did have moments because that is the reality of it, but I feel like you made it very clear that like these are people first and foremost, and they have these different conditions, these different problems that they're working through in their life, but that they will always have those. And I really liked the non-linear sort of recovery mentions. I thought that was really great. I know from first-hand experience of my own mental health stuff that it is very much like you wake up one day and it's not a good day, or you have a great day and then all of a sudden it doesn't even feel like anything happens, it just suddenly becomes awful. And I feel like it was really interesting for me. I don't want to get too much into the romance specifically until a little bit later, but I don't know, I think it's if you don't talk for the first 10 minutes or so about stuff like that, then the YouTube isn't as picky. But the first time that they're in their house together, that is a bad moment for her, for both of them obviously, because he's very supportive and he feels the sort of weight of her struggles as much as she feels the weight of his. But I think it is really, I thought it was like a nice choice to have that first night in that house that they have together be sort of ruined, and I said that in air quotes, by the fact that, yeah, it was a great day and they had a great time and they love living in this new space together, but she still has trauma. Like, it just felt really nice that you did that, and it was not unexpected, like it wasn't like out of character, but it was unexpected in the sense that I think a lot of authors would be afraid to do that. I don't know if that even makes sense, but that was a moment that really stood out to me on it.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. I think that was something that was really important to me with how I represented these mental health struggles throughout the book, because in real life, these things are nonlinear, whatever it is that you are struggling with. And I think a lot of times it is shown in a black and white way of either you're at rock bottom or you're doing amazing, and how it can just be a roller coaster and back and forth, and how also you can simultaneously be living some of the best moments of your life, living your dreams, and then the next moment you're crashing out again. And really appreciate you pointing out that particular scene when they move into their new house together, because I think it is something that's hard when it's like, oh, here's this super happy thing, they're in love, they've moved into this home, they're having this moment, and how things can go sideways, and I think wanting to show that kind of real world depiction of it too, especially pulled honestly a lot from my own lived experiences as well, especially early on in my relationship with my now husband after my own essay history and how those struggles presented, and when it was in an exciting time in our relationship as well, and how I think that happens with a lot of people, that it can be that you have amazing things going on and you're still struggling there, which I think it can be hard because, of course, I wanted to be able to show, oh, yeah, it's not like every moment for both of them that they're constantly struggling, but that it is weaving in even when things are going well as well, that it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Absolutely. And I think as well, even if you don't have like those specific experiences, it is something that sort of transcends, like you're neurodivergent, I believe.
Yes.
So
autistic and ADHD. So yes.
Yeah. I also am, and I know for a fact that like I can have a great day, but if I get overstimulated and I start to edge towards sensory overload sort of symptoms, I become basically just non-respondent. Like my face is just completely still. I'm not really feeling anything, and I just shut down because my body is so tired, my brain is so tired. And I think it really is the way that the mental health stuff is all portrayed in this book through the different characters and the way that they experience it. It very much is like you can imagine what it's like to be, not exactly, but what it's like to be a pop star who's doing all of these shows while trying to put on a good front, which is, again, the neurodivergent thing. It's like the masking sort of stuff. And it's really exhausting. Like it is so exhausting, and that's when you're not even considering like the anxieties, the actual trauma that you have to sort of deal with. And it was really interesting. And I think the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about your experiences and the way that they impacted the book is that you've discussed this in your marketing anyway, that so you have worked with clients who have been in the industry, but you've also got a husband who works in the industry, in the sound part of it. I'm butchering this because I know nothing about music life really besides what I've seen in this book. But I'll let you have a little talk about that and about your connection to the world that you wrote about, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So my husband, Sean, is a touring audio engineer. His job isn't being a guitarist, but he's also a hobby guitarist. He's played music since he was super young, and then I think it was when he was in high school that he realized kind of that working in touring as a audio engineer was a career path, and then he went to school for that, which is how he ended up in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where we live currently. He grew up in San Diego, California, but then moved here for school, especially because in terms of touring music and just the music industry in general, Nashville has the nickname Music City for a reason. And I won't get into the whole winding story of how we met because it's a very convoluted one. But the short version is that we first started talking when he was actually on tour. And so our whole relationship together, he's been touring with varying degrees of artists, with artists just starting out up to like, huge household names doing like playing massive festivals. Like, I don't know, as far as I know that some things cross over to the UK as far as things like names that people know, but like people in the US will have heard of Stagecoach Festival, which happens usually like kind of on an opposite weekend from Coachella. It's kind of like the country version of Coachella, and like he's worked that festival. He's worked basically all of the different like morning and daytime talk shows. He's worked all sorts of he's also worked at most of the arenas throughout the US, and he's done I don't think he's done I think the most international he's done as far as audio work is Canada. But anyway, so he's done a lot of stuff in that realm, and he's also had a lot of different roles ranging from kind of more entry-level roles up to having really senior roles. And he's also done some studio work, which is cool. But But as a result, I have heard so much about his experiences. And when we first started dating, we were long distance for almost the first year of our relationship. And through a lot of it, he was on tour. And so kind of had that experience of, and continue to have that experience of being in a relationship with someone who's in that realm and getting to hear all of those stories that I was able to pull from. And then also as a therapist, because of me having that connection to the industry, it made me really passionate about working with people who need mental health support. Working in this industry, I've worked with people who are recording artists, people who are sound engineers, people who are managers, kind of all different angles of the industry. Because of course someone can, a therapist can work with someone in the music industry without having a personal tie, but there is just something different with someone who gets that world when they don't have to explain to me what all of these different roles are that most people understandably would have no idea what they are, because you don't see what's going on behind the scenes most of the time. Because usually if you see what's happening behind the scenes, it means that something's going wrong. It's kind of it's a good show if my husband isn't seen. If he's seen, it means that shit has hit the fan usually. So it's been really cool. And also I grew up around a lot of music. My brothers make music. And so that's like kind of, I've had that connection there. And so I wanted to be able to represent the music industry in a way that also wasn't dramatized. I did want to show, that it isn't all glamorous. It's not all like, oh, I'm playing these amazing shows and I'm like selling all these albums and selling all these tickets and I have all these fans and everything is just perfect and glamorous. I wanted to show the darker parts of it, but I also, similarly to how I represented the mental health struggles, I didn't want to do it in a way that's like a caricature that was just doing it for shock value. Of course, there are some intense moments in the book, but I didn't want to do it just for the sake of doing it. And of course, because it's fiction, it's not 1,000% accurate, but I did consult my husband a lot in the process, honestly, more than I think he would like, including we've been in the process of, he's helping me produce an audiobook for the book, which we just finished recording the other day. So he has spent so much time hearing the book and all that. And I kind of have a running doc of different experiences he's had on tour that can pull inspiration, or times where I've said to him, I'm like, hey, can you give me a list of basically the technical explanation for these things and then the normal person explanation for these things? And so it's something that's cool. And especially because, I'm a big romance reader myself and personally really enjoy like rock star romance, that kind of music industry romance angle. And while there are definitely, I'm for sure not the only, Ever Since New York isn't the only book that handles it in a mostly accurate way, but I think a lot of times, especially because usually people who are writing about that aren't in that realm, a lot of the time it is done in a way that you're not really seeing the accurate pieces there of what's happening behind the scenes. And it was really fun also being able, because most of the book happens while they're on tour, getting to include things about different cities and venues and little moments. Like one of my favorite scenes that I put was a scene where they're playing I don't know if the game Twister is popular in the UK, but it's one that was super popular here in the US when I was growing up. And so I had a scene of them playing Twister in the green room, because that's also there was another moment where the guys were playing Mario Kart, because that's also one that like my husband oftentimes on like if it's because there's kind of the difference between fly dates for tour, which is where you're flying to a show, versus bus dates, which is where you're taking the tour bus. And especially often on the bus, he'll bring his Nintendo Switch and a bunch of them will play like things like Mario Kart or whatever. And so wanted to include little things like that are fun too. But yeah, so I feel like was cool to be able to have that as an undercurrent in a way that I think just you're not going to see from someone who, of course, people can do a lot of research and do things well, but I think it is just different how it can be represented when it's also coming from like firsthand knowledge there.
I will say like the learning about the industry, some of it was harder to me than reading German. I was just like, oh, okay, because I had no idea even some of the venues, like I'd heard of obviously some of them, but it honestly, it was so interesting just to, and like, again, as you said, like knowing that it was written by somebody who did have that inside link to all of this, it was very interesting to see it. And I will say, I know about Nashville because of Taylor Swift. You mention it as well. But yeah, there were like little bits that I was aware of, but like there was a lot. I didn't even know. This is kind of crazy. Until this book, honestly believed that Madison Square Garden was an actual garden. I believed it was an outdoor stage. Let me tell you, when I was like...
I mean, totally fair.
I was like, they've played this one space a lot. How many people fit in this garden? And then I was like, oh.
It's like a garden where everybody just comes in.
You know, because it's, okay, so there's, like, when on TV that, like, we watched the ball drop at New Year's Eve, I always thought that was Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's outside. And I think that's not even a joke. I thought that my whole life until, which is really embarrassing, really. But you proved that it wasn't to me because you educated me. So... yeah, it was.
Hey,
it was
something.
I will add one thing that could make something confusing. There is actually, so I grew up in New York, and there is also a Madison Square Park in New York. So that is one thing, and it was wild until I grew up in a part of New York called Long Island. That's a suburb like I lived about an hour outside of New York City, but then my first 2 years of college, I lived in Manhattan, so it's like most typically known as New York City. And I had no idea that Madison Square Park and Madison Square Garden were two different areas. I thought that Madison Square Park was like the outside area, like right outside of Madison Square Garden, like where, you know, people are, and then found out that Madison Square Park exists. I still don't know, like, especially because they're not they're not super far away, but it's not like they're around the block from each other, so I don't know exactly why, like, they have such, I mean, I guess there's probably, if I look into the history of it, there's probably some sort of connection, but I remember being super confused by that because there was a time where someone was like, oh, do you want to meet up at Madison Square Park? And I was like, sure, thinking I knew where I was going, and then that actually was not where I was going at all.
It was really fun though to kind of dive into this world, and I think that with that we could talk about our guides in this world. So it is dual POV. I'm not wrong, it's first person, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't read it that long ago, I should know that, but yeah. Which I quite like. I think there are a lot of people who are weirdly resistant to it, and I don't get why, because it's been around for a really long time. But I think that a sort of dual perspective book in first person can be really immersive, and especially there is one scene in particular, arguably the most graphic scene in terms of eating disorder mentions, where I feel like that is one of those scenes for me where if it was my book and I was thinking, do I want this to be first person or third, I would just think it is so powerful on first.
I'm guessing you mean the like Las Vegas bathroom one.
Yeah.
Like where she relapses, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's why they have the argument, isn't it, if I remember? Because of that. Or am I missing it?
Yeah.
No, they end up having their, like,
that argument
right after that, yeah.
Yeah, so.
I thought that was one of those scenes where it's like, yeah, this book being in first person was very good because you get a really interesting look into the two of their heads throughout this evening and the next morning, where I mean, I guess technically you could do it in third, but it's one of those like things where it feels very close. It feels very them against everybody else for a minute, and then them against each other, which is like it just is really, it pops, I think, because of the first. And it, for me, I think is one of those things that really shows their character, where he doesn't get annoyed very often, Kieran, and
no, he does not.
and it's interesting that when he does, it's about her. It's about him caring about this woman that he has grown up with and respects and has seen be hurt a lot. And obviously there's the scene where he gets angry because he's jealous, which is a different thing. But in this one, he's very angry, not at her, but at the situation sort of thing. Like he's desperate to fix it and he can't. And I think, again, that is very real. I love that it mentions, as far as Emmeline goes, her parents when she was younger and how she kind of grew apart from them a little bit because they were pushy, but they were pushy with good intentions. And I think it's one of those things that, again, like if you have grown up, or even if you haven't, I guess, even as an adult, it's very possible to have a relationship with your family, your close friends and whatnot, and for them to be so desperate for you to get well and for you to heal that you feel kind of like you're being attacked, and it feels like they don't understand, they don't really care, they're actually working against you. And it's really interesting to see that both from the perspective of somebody who is trying to get her to eat, but then also from her perspective where she's like, I know that I shouldn't have done that, but I am not in the right headspace right now. And it was really interesting to me to read. And that's why I think it worked really well in first person, because I do think that you get a level of personal experience that comes from reading it in a way that makes it feel almost a little bit more, I don't even know the word, but you can kind of immerse yourself in this experience, which you shouldn't want to, but it is important, I think, to understand, especially because we are in a world where mental health is simultaneously being preached about it being, you know, something that we should be taking care of ourselves, and if we need therapy, let's go to therapy. If we need to take medication, you know, the stigma around it is being broken down, while still it being something that, you know, people, you'll probably be extra aware of this because of the therapy connection, but like there was a woman who's gone sort of viral on the internet because she's in a psychosis and she believes that her therapist was in love with her and was abusing their relationship, and people were literally, they were using her mental state as an insult against her, because it is still so common for people to, the second that they see somebody with mental health not doing well, to demonize them, even though it's spoken about as if this thing is something that we should be sharing and getting help for. So I don't know, for me, like, it was really interesting to see these two characters and their growth as people, but also to see them at that low moment specifically.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that scene, and I guess series of scenes there in particular, was so hard to write because of my own experiences, especially because, I mean, I struggled with an eating disorder for many years, and I'm now in a really strong place in my recovery, but it was something that also throughout the editing process that, it wasn't surface level from the start, like it definitely had a depth, but throughout my process, especially of developmental editing, my editor, Sabrina, who's also a Novel Bound member like us, she really pushed me to dig deeper into that, including with the, fight that Kieran and Emmeline had after the relapse. Like, that was something that we kind of, with each round of developmental edits, extended more, and it was so hard. I remember, like, every time I added to that scene was crying as I wrote it, because it was really hard to try to balance, like you said, the part of where he's angry, but he's not angry at her. He's angry at, like, what is happening and at her hurting herself and at himself for not being able to help. And then at himself when he realizes that he went too far and he's like, shit, like, what did I do? And when he then, like, calls his sister, and all that. And I think it's something that it's really tricky when you really care about someone, and how we can't make people change even when they are self-destructing. And it was really important to me also to pull that parallel from kind of showing why she lashed out in the way she did because of her history from when she was young with how her parents responded to her eating disorder, and then how she felt in that moment, that it was like, for her, it wasn't her present day adult self reacting to what Kieran was saying. It was her going back to when she was that teenager and her parents were, forcing her into recovery. And so it was definitely, super painful to write, but also was something that was really important because I also had moments and, have had so many moments like that myself in my own recovery journey. Because it was back when I was 19 that I started recovery, and I had been struggling since I was like 10 years old. And I remember I had several relapses, of course, along the way. And there was a particular friend, I actually pulled up the text because it was something that I remembered so clearly in my mind. But so it was 2016 that I started recovery. But then in early 2017, I had a pretty bad relapse, and I was kind of going in and out of that. And I had a friend who sent, and I was talking to a friend about how I missed my eating disorder and that I wanted to go back to it. And he was like, do you miss starving? Do you miss passing out? Do you miss being miserable? Do you miss having to lie to everyone? Do you miss all of that? Because that's the harsh reality of how you got there. You can't have a life that feels fulfilling and a life that you're loving if you are so deep in that thing, and how it sucks that, of course, there is an appropriate and healthy way to communicate concerns and an inappropriate and unhealthy way, but how there are times where there kind of has to be that tough love element of, hey, I'm not going to co-sign you doing this to yourself because I love you too much to see that. And so it was really challenging for sure, especially because, like you said, Kieran very rarely gets angry, especially with Emmeline. That's kind of just been an undercurrent of their friendship their whole lives, is that's never been their thing. And that was also just another thing throughout the editing process was, especially after the first draft, was having to add more imperfections around Kieran, which was really hard because I just love his character so much. And I also wanted to, of course, be able to represent someone who was totally anti-patriarchal and at the same time having to be okay, well, he's also a human. It doesn't have to be, oh, he's either always responding in the right way or always responding in the wrong way, but was particularly challenging for sure.
Because it is difficult, and from my own experiences of, as I said, my mental health journey, I have only ever been in Emmeline's position in that specific way. I've been the one who has felt like I was backed against a wall by somebody that I trusted, and it does feel sometimes when I'm, even if it's not even that bad, if I am in a situation that reminds me of those worst times, it does take me right back, and all of a sudden I'm a child and I don't want to speak and I don't want to argue. I just want everything in the world to disappear. And it's so understandable the way that she reacted, but also it is, as you said, it must have been so weird for her to see this person who very rarely gets angry to seemingly be almost a different person in that moment. And when her brain was already distorting the facts, it is really difficult. And it obviously there are a lot of other moments where it's kind of the opposite of that as well, where he is very, very tender, and it is interesting to see that change in him, and to know that it was necessity sort of thing. It was the woman that he loved was in need of help, and she just wasn't willing to accept it at that moment. And it was just very well written, and obviously there are a lot of reasons for that, but I think that it is one of those books that I can fully understand sobbing writing it, because it is really difficult just to have any kind of memories of those moments, no matter how long has passed and whatnot. But I think it will be a really beneficial scene, especially for people who have people in their lives going through that, because they'll have been the Kieran. And that it's just so important to have that representation of both of these people. And the same as well for his OCD, where, you know, we see from his perspective that he understands that what he's doing isn't rational. He's not stupid. He knows that nothing probably will happen if he stops washing his hands before he's done his full ritual. But he has to anyway, because it's a mental condition.
Yeah, he has an ex, if I remember at the beginning of the book, he has an ex who doesn't understand why he keeps doing it, because she just thinks it's weird, doesn't she?
Very unsupportive, to say the
It's
least.
just like, that's definitely, like, I've run into people like that, and it's like, how can you not believe someone if they're struggling and you're just treating them like that? It's like, ugh. So yeah, I thought that was quite realistic.
Yeah, it is baffling the amount of people who, like, even myself, like the fact that I was accused of lying for being depressed when I was like 12 years old and didn't really understand what depression was. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like people have this habit of being very cruel and purposefully misunderstanding mental health conditions. And I think it is really interesting that you had, on the one hand, you had a man who was treating Emmeline really badly and who physically, like, assaulted her at one point because he was just that awful of a person, and he was willing to do awful things and to make her feel small physically and mentally. But then you also just have someone who is, like, I think a much more average kind of cruel, where, you know, she was in a relationship with somebody who had an actual, like, diagnosed condition, and rather than understanding that and being supportive, chose to belittle him. Like, it's so realistic in a way that makes me want to reach through the book and just shake them and be like, how can you be like that, you know? But I think it is really nice to see how, going back to the other scenes later on where they get together, the main couple, they get together and they have struggles, but they help them. And rather than it being like, how can you love me? You know, why are you still with me because of these things that I can't necessarily control always and that I'm struggling with all the time? It's, well, I love you because you're a great person, and those things are just a part of who you are. Like, they're not a good part, you know, I would rather you didn't have them, but I'm going to help you with them, because that's what people should be like. And that's what I meant by healthy before as well, is that he is a book boyfriend who, well, I will admit, I'm not a huge romance reader. I've already mentioned, I just am not a huge romance reader, because depending on the way that the specific relationships are portrayed, I might not like them. And I think that one of the big things for me is that I hate when men, or women, of course, when people just in general, like in a romance book, are romanticized for the way that they treat the main character, and it is horrific. Like, they will say and do things, and it's just like, why are you letting that slide? It's so awful. And he isn't like that. And I meant to mention this earlier. Oh God, what was the context that I was meant to bring this up in? It was when you were talking about the music industry. I remembered that obviously Kieran was, not in every way, but he was vaguely inspired by a certain musical artist.
Just a little.
Yeah, and the book itself, I haven't listened to it, but I'm pretty sure it's a song by Harry Styles, right?
Yes, yeah, okay. It's from his first album.
And there's a lot of references in general to One Direction. Can't believe I just forgot the name of One Direction. That's insane. I'm literally English.
It's not a band you listen to.
Yeah, I saw them.
Watch them on the X Factor, that's about it.
But yeah, I'm not a huge fan, so I don't know. I'm just not. I'm very hit or miss with bands. Like, either I'm like, I love every song that you've ever made, or I like maybe 4 in total. So I think that's what it is with One Direction. We actually did a little bit of lore. Oh, that was what I meant to say. I had Twister bedding. So it was very much
That's popular. So fun.
Yeah, so it was very much popular in the UK. But yeah, that was... Oh, I've lost my train of thought. Story of my life. We sang at my primary school leavers assembly Story of My Life. So we sang that, and that's about the strongest connection that I have to One Direction. And I will say I missed a lot of the references in terms of the context behind them. But I think it's nice to see, and I do this, and Becky did this as well. It's nice, I think, to see people's passions in their books like that. And because Becky, if you don't know, she wrote a book about a radio show, and so there are songs mentioned by name, artists. Paramore is a big one. And I do the same. My current book, one of my main characters is obsessed with music, and it's set in the 70s, and I love 60s, 70s, 80s music particularly. So like, I just think it's really fun to have, and you had a playlist as well at the start of your book.
Yes.
I love that. I think that we've all had a start in like fan fiction.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's fun because when I was growing up and fan fiction was becoming this very expressive medium where you would have playlists and you'd have casts and you would have like little references, and you'd be able to interact with your audience in that way and to be like, look at this thing. And it's nice, I think, that younger authors, you're both about the same age, I think.
Yeah, I'm 28.
Yeah, same, yeah.
I am a little bit younger. but
we're all in our 20s, that's all that matters.
Yeah, we're all in the same sort of generation.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the letter. I have beef with this letter.
Z/Z, there you go.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that it's nice to see all of us younger authors who are breaking down the stigma about publishing and about writing, and who not only are getting engaged in these sorts of writing communities like Novelbound, and not gatekeeping that sort of stuff, not gatekeeping, I think it was you, Colleen, you had, because of your experiences as a self-published author, you were willing to share resources and stuff about how to format books for publishing, because you had to learn about that.
Oh yeah, no, all the things you learn as you go, which I know that for you, Becky, with learning that's just, it's a whole journey. But yeah, including the fangirl references was really fun, especially, I mean, of course, with it being set in the music industry, and I think generationally also like the age of, because Kieran and Emmeline start out, they're 25 in the beginning of the book, and then they both turn 26, but also with kind of, and it's like, I think it's towards the end that it's like there's a particular like set of paragraphs where it's mentioned kind of like the power of like fan culture, especially in music, and how those relationships that are built like transcend the actual music and the artist, and how these communities are built. And like for me personally, a few years ago, I guess it was kind of in the middle of Love on Tour, Harry Styles' tour. It was like early 2023. I had made a TikTok post basically asking if, or I guess it was actually, was it 20? Yeah, it was early 2023 that I had made a TikTok post basically being like, hey, is there anyone like 21 and up who wants to join a Harry Styles group chat? Because it felt like a lot of, even though like, I feel like our generation, it made sense, not that it doesn't make sense for other generations to be One Direction and like Harry Styles fans, but that it was, their music had started when we were pretty much kids. But I found a lot of group chats I was seeing and like being invited to had like 13-year-olds in them, and I'm like, okay, that's not the vibe. But it started where, I mean, the group chat started out much larger, but B started, when he was still on his tour, and where we of course were talking about the tour and like obsessing over his outfits and like sending each other live streams and whatever. But then it ended up going far beyond that, and while we still of course talk about him and like send whatever posts we see as far as when he's like seen out and about, and us clowning over whenever his next album is going to come out and things like that, but that these have become some of my very best friends, and I wouldn't have met them otherwise. I mean, they live all across the country. One of them came to my wedding. One of them came to stay in Nashville with me when Niall had a show last year. Like, there's just been, it's just really cool being able to build these friendships that have like started as a result of a particular fandom, but now have become friends that have gone far beyond that, because I think that is like the really cool thing about music too, that of course I think there can be really toxic sides of fan culture as well, which of course I think played in like with the death of Liam Payne and things like that I think that there of course are really toxic ends of fandoms. And I also unfortunately have also experienced that in terms of different people that I've met at different points, but I think it was something that was like I really wanted to include some of those fan interactions in there, and having it where it's something that just does go far beyond that. And I think also kind of just goes along with like girlhood too, and how all of those things, like how we grow up and how we're able to build these connections that stem from something kind of unrelated in a way.
It is really, I think, especially with like Taylor Swift, who arguably has one of like the biggest fan bases ever. And I remember the Love on Tour stuff. He did do the sign readings, which Emmeline does. It's one of those things where it's such a big thing, and like even I think generally it's partially because of the social media stuff. Like my book is about Formula One and I love it, and there is this quote from one of the ex-racers who talks about how the racers themselves have stopped being just solid rivals and they've started to actually make friendships and to hang out together outside. Like everything is becoming a little bit less toxic, but then on the other side you do have that super toxic stuff, and I think one of the things that really interested me in that specifically was the label, which realistically they were old white people. Probably men. And it's like the difference between their idea of what an artist has to be versus what an artist can be and be successful. Like that is like such a good example of how the younger that people are, the less, I don't know. And I think it's like how when you see like Chappell Roan performing with Elton John, and it's like, this is the power of music, guys. Okay, let's have it be a positive, fun. Like, why is it so serious? Why are we saying that these pop artists aren't as good as this musician from like 20 years ago? You know, like it's really, I just think it's so sweet. And also you have the fact that her album that she's on tour with is a little bit different, a little bit darker almost. It's got Emmeline basically she's a girl's girl in every way. She is, I'm not making this up, right? My brain is doing that thing where it like tries to tell me I'm wrong. She has like a hugely pink bedroom. Yeah. So like she's not afraid of her femininity. The worst part about her sort of desire to dress up and stuff is that her body sometimes, like her brain tells her that it's not good enough for the outfits and that everyone's gonna be picking it apart, which is obviously, I think in general, something that women especially, we've had this discussion, me and Becky as well, about how women especially are more likely to just hate their bodies. I literally, like yesterday, was it yesterday?
It was Saturday.
I
you sent me that picture. It was Saturday.
Because I was like, I cannot tell if this dress suits me or not because I feel so ugly today. And like I was like, I am not going to make a decision on whether or not to keep this really nice, affordable dress based off of the brain that I know is not reliable. So I had to ask a friend.
Oh, for sure.
It's like reading about a character who is very feminine, but then also she likes baseball because women are multifaceted beings who can have multiple interests. I feel like we've come to a really weird point with books where sometimes it does feel like we've come back to the not like other girls stuff. And whenever I read a book and I'm like, maybe I wouldn't say it like that. Maybe I wouldn't have her make that comment. It just it really was nice to see a woman who had this very realistic personality, and who, especially because like her sexuality was something that she was very open about and unashamed of. You know, it was like, I don't really want to keep having these casual relationships, but also that's not a bad thing. It's just not for me anymore. You know, I love that. I think that her representation as a character was very nice. It was well done. And I think the same for Kieran, where it's like, he's a man, but he's not a man who's like gonna say something that's very sexist and have it be written off as attractive. I feel like we've kind of gotten to a point where, I don't know if you saw the dark romance convention stuff that happened.
Oh yeah.
I feel like
it is. No, that was wild, and it's just it's so interesting because I definitely like, there are some dark romance books that I've really enjoyed, and of course there are ones that I think go too far, but especially with everything that happened with that particular convention, it's just like wild what we can like also label as acceptable behavior in different spaces, which I think goes like along with like parasocial relationships, which of course can be present in the music industry, but also in spaces like with authors at like, and like how it just like, it's wild how everything that went down with that convention was just like the way I was seeing it when I was going on like, I'm a big user of Threads as a social media platform. I mean, I consume more, and I was looking at it and it kept like, there kept being more and more things. Like, I swear every time I refreshed, there was just more, and I was like, and also it wasn't things that were like a little questionable. I'm like, that's something that I know, like, it wasn't like, exactly. It wasn't something where it was like, oh, okay, I could see how like that could be misinterpreted. It was like stuff that was so far off the deep end that I'm like, there's no realm in where you would think that's okay, and that people were trying to like, you know, make half-assed apologies of being like, oh, I didn't realize that people would be whatever, and I'm like, how did you not realize that wasn't okay?
It's so frustrating, and honestly, like, I think that's why books like this are especially important, because you show that you can have that we're talking about the spicy scenes very briefly in the 10 seconds we have left. I think that it was good that you had him be different in bed and darker in the ways that some people like online, I think, but without it being like, he is a bad person, and without normalizing a lack of consent, because that is, I think that is the big one, I think, is that a lot of romance, dark romance specifically, it started to normalize the idea of no consent being attractive. And it's like, I don't know, maybe we need a few more books to remind people that that is in fact not real life. Just,
for sure.
Let's bring that back. And it is...
and I think that's something that was really important to me with writing that, because I think it's something that can get really black and white, especially with people who are survivors of like any type of like sexual violence, that it can be like, oh, you couldn't possibly like something that was like at all in the realm of something similar that once traumatized you. And it's like, no, we can be multifaceted, and also that she was like, there was a lot that she was able to reclaim there, because I think it all just falls back again to the good old patriarchy and how those standards are. And like you said too, with being able to have like, I think it showed kind of the complexity of Kieran too, where there was kind of like just the difference between how he like is when he is just like, you know, around everyone, and then when it's just the two of them, how it can be very different, and that it's something that they both like. It's not something that's like, you know, that shift is something that, it's like a shift that they both enjoy. It's not a shift that's like, you know, because it's something that she is consenting to and enjoying. And I think that's something that, like, of course, again, not that like I've seen it represented in plenty of other books as well, but it was something really important to me with this, of being like, okay, it doesn't have to be black and white. It doesn't have to be like, oh, because I've experienced like trauma that I can't enjoy this thing, and I can't want something that's beyond just kind of like basic vanilla whatever.
See, I fully agree with that, and I'll let Becky ask a question before.
I'm just disagreeing completely. Like, completely off the rails. But this is towards like the writing aspect of it. So, like, did you always know that you wanted to self-publish, like to go indie? Or was that always like a thing you were just like, yes, I'm set on this?
I honestly wasn't sure. So when I first when I started writing ever since New York, and it's not the first thing I've ever written. I've been a writer since I was a kid. I would say it's the first like true novel that I wrote. Given I think I had mentioned in Novel Bound like last week that I had found some old stuff that I had written, and there apparently was a book, I use air quotes, that I completed that had I don't know how many chapters, but somehow was only 5,000 words, and like that was the end of it. And I started a second book of it. I wrote it when I was like 11, so I'll give 11-year-old me a pass.
That seems to be such an age for writers, because I'm like, when I was 12, I wrote, like, I've got my entire first draft of my, like, this book that I was obsessed with. I was like, what the heck is this? It's awful.
Oh, yeah. And so I didn't know if I wanted to publish it at all. And actually, as I wrote it, one of my close friends, her name is Grace, she was reading along as I wrote, and I truly had no idea if I wanted to do anything with it. And then as I want to say when I was like halfway through, I was like, okay, I don't know what publishing route I want to take, but I do want to explore publishing this. And even when I finished the first draft, I was still really waffling on what I wanted to do. And then eventually, I had actually, while I was in the decision process, I have a friend who's kind of a newer literary agent. She like asked to read my first draft, which is wild because that's usually like
the worst.
Not what goes on. But I was like, okay, I've known you for years, whatever. And like, if she decides that she would want to rep it, then I'll pursue traditional. But if she doesn't, then I'll pursue indie, just because I knew that I didn't have querying in me. I was like, I just don't.
Oh yeah,
I cannot do querying. And then
it's horrible.
And she gave really helpful feedback that she ended up, of course, like not choosing to represent it. It was something where it was mostly because it was kind of too close to home for her because of her own eating disorder history. Mm-hmm. But she was more or less like, I know someone else will love this. And so then at that point, I had already had Sabrina, who's now my editor. She had done a sample edit because I was like, okay, in case I want to do indie, see, let me figure out, because I know I'm going to need someone to professionally edit it. And then decided the indie route and really dove in. And it's obviously, and as I'm sure you know, Becky, it's a whole thing, and it's a lot of learning as you go.
The messages I get.
Oh yeah, no. And so it's been a journey, but it's one, especially because, of course, I don't have by any means like the largest social media platform in the world, but over the years that I've built up my social media presence, which is also how I ended up deciding to use my legal name instead of a pen name, because I was like, I have my legal name as my presence on all these platforms, and it felt like, not that I expect everybody to make this decision, but for me, I was like, it feels like a waste for me not to use this platform that I've put, I guess, like 9 years into at this point. So for me, I think also that puts me in a different position than some other people who are, when they're figuring out what publishing route they want to take, because of course, if you don't have any amount of social media platform, or if you're not open to trying to build one, like I don't even know. I'm sure there's some wild statistic on how many books are like put on Amazon every day that people aren't, if you're not marketing it and if you don't have some amount of presence, like people aren't going to see it, which of course some people don't care. Like they're just like, oh, I just want to be able to have it for like my friends and family. It's fine, which that's also totally valid. But I knew for me, I was like, okay, I do have enough of a platform that while, of course, followers don't convert directly into readers, like there's still a lot of, especially because a lot of my audience has followed me for like mental health content and things like that. But for me, I'm in a different position than some indie authors where, whether it's that they don't have a platform or they're just not interested in marketing their book, which fair, because it is like another damn full-time job, especially getting so close to release. But I'm really glad I chose this path because of having so much agency in the process. And I think it's been really cool that I've like kind of kind of like how people talk about having like a village for their kids growing up, I guess, in a way, like how people refer to their books as like their book babies. That like, I think it's especially cool how so much of Novel Bound has been involved, because like Sabrina is my editor, Sophie, one of the co-founders, she designed my cover. Kim, another member, had done my author photos when I went to the retreat in Savannah. And I've also had a number of like alpha and beta readers who came from Novel Bound readers, and of course now doing this podcast with two of you, that it's been really cool to have such a community piece of it that I think has made it more special. And I think we're also in a day and age where it is possible to self-publish in a way that can be, of course, while it's never going to be the same as traditional publishing, and I think there are so many pros and cons to both paths, but it's something that I'm sure like in the 80s and 90s and even early 2000s, like there was no, I think the ability to self-publish was very limited, and B, like just getting people to read your book wouldn't be a thing in the way that it is now with like Book Talk and Bookstagram and Book Threads and Book Twitter and all of that. That I think it is just we're in a space where, of course, as a result, it can be oversaturated, but I think it's also, I think we're in a time where we're starting to get away also from indie being looked at as less than, and it just being looked as something that's different. Of course, there's still people who look down on it, but I think they're also authors who do both. Like, I think it's really cool. Like, I know there was an author, her name's Courtney Walsh, who had done a Novel Bound event months ago that Sophie is friends with, and like she is traditionally published, has been a New York Times bestseller, but she also she self-publishes books as well, kind of in between. And so I think it's something where it's just cool that there are so many avenues that people can take now.
I think especially a lot of authors, because I'm doing a master's in creative writing, and we had a few authors come on, and a lot of them were saying, like, I think there was this one author where she was saying that she wanted to escape what her brand name was, so she started self-publishing under another name. So it's like there's still that advantage, even if you're traditionally published, to go self-publish with like another name, and it's like it's good that that opportunity's there.
For sure.
It's just like crazy. I think the only other question I had was, it's gone from my head now. It's gone from my head. I think you kind of, I got it. I think you kind of answered it. Like, you're saying, like, you grew up writing as a kid. Like, was there anything that spurred that, or was it just something you always thought you just did on a whim, for example?
Yeah, so I don't know when the first time I really started writing was. I was obsessed with books from when I was super young. I definitely fall into the air quotes gifted to neurodivergent and burnt out pipeline that I learned how to read when I was 3 years old, which like at first my mom didn't believe it. She thought I had just, because like she read me so many books and things, she thought I had just memorized. Like I had started reading, there was like a little like kids magazine we had in the backseat of the car. My mom thought that I had like just memorized it because we had read so many things. But then my aunt, her sister, she's one of my favorite people in the world. She is a writer. She used to teach writing at the university level, and she said to my mom, she's like, no, like this is the like new edition this week we have not read this to her yet. Like, and she realized that, and then constantly was reading. Like I mentioned in my acknowledgement section that my grandma used to bring me to Barnes and Noble every week growing up, that they would have, I think it was like, I might be pulling this out of my ass, that it was on Wednesdays. I think it was on Wednesdays. I don't know why I think it was on Wednesdays, but they would have like a story time where someone would read a book, and she would always let me then, buy however many books I wanted. And that started from when I was young, and then would always go to the library with my mom and would leave with like these massive stacks of books, and was just constantly reading, and as a result writing. And like I know something that was really special in my kindergarten class was that my teacher, basically, she let us create books that were then kind of like spiral bound, where they were on like cardstock or whatever, and then they had like the little like black spiral binding. And I had posted on TikTok recently one of them, because I had asked my mom because my mom saves like everything for better or for worse. And so I said to her, I was like, do you still have any of those? And it was so cute. There was one that I wrote. It was called like My Cat. And it was like, they were all like little picture books where, you know, you would write out whatever. She would also type it, and then you would have a picture also like made my cat like purple or something. And I have no idea why, but like things like that where I was just always writing. And then when I was either 11 or 12, I went to a creative writing camp, which is where I met my best friend because her mom was our writing teacher at that camp. And just really, that's what I feel like when I really fell in love with writing. And then I kind of got away from creative writing as an adult. I had done some like journalism-y stuff when I was in college, but I'd kind of gotten away from the creative piece. And then also had gotten away from the love of writing just because of, I think it happens to so many people that when you're in college and then graduate school and whatever, that you're having to read so much for academic purposes that you A, don't have the time, B, don't have the brain space that I was like, and then when I finished grad school and I had time where I didn't have to be reading for academic reasons, I started reading fiction again, which I hadn't done in years, and that kind of then sparked being like, oh, like maybe I thought to myself, I was like, oh, I couldn't do that. And then I was like, well, if you don't try, you don't know. And that's kind of then how Ever Since New York ended up starting.
And here we are today. And
here we are.
The last thing I think just to mention is that this is book 1 of a series.
Yeah.
And where can people follow you if they want to stay up to date on when the next book is coming out, what it's going to be called?
Yeah, so I'm on all the different social media platforms as Colleen Werner because I was venting about this in Novel Bound the other day, that because I have what's referred to as legacy verification because I had a lot of like media attention when I was in college that I got like the traditional blue check mark and you're not allowed to change your username, which I personally think is really stupid. But anyway, that's besides the point. But as a result, I could change it on other platforms, but I wasn't able to change it on Instagram when I got married. So I was like, I'll just keep it the same. So it's Colleen M. Werner. Yeah. And I'm still figuring out when I have the title for book 2. I have, and I have like kind of timeline for when that'll be published as well. But I have to decide when I want to reveal the title. And I also have, there's like currently a total of 5 books planned in this series of interconnected standalones. Who knows, maybe my brain will decide to somehow create more, because originally it was just the 1, and then it was 2, and then it was 3, and then it was 4, and then it was 5, so who knows.
Quintet of stories. And yeah, I mean, it's been very nice to have you on. I hope that people do go. If they haven't already, if they're still here for some reason, hearing all the spoilers, go look her up, okay? But yeah, I mean, we've gone over even the extra time that we've given ourselves. That's how much there is to talk about here.
I mean, that's normal.
I am a yapper beyond yapper. Like it's while I'm somewhat introvert, like while I'm introverted, if you get me yapping, I will clearly, as represented, I will not stop.
Especially about your own book, it is like such a trap to fall into, to talk about books. It's like
it's fun though.
Oh yeah.
But it has been wonderful. So everyone, go read, go follow, keep up to date for this world. It's Love on the Set List is the name of.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can also, I think we say this, usually I can't actually remember, it does always help, especially with indie authors, to rate on Goodreads and leave actual weird reviews.
Yes.
So go be nice. But
please.
But yeah, I think that it's been a really nice conversation. We've hit a lot of, from serious to the more like bubbly parts. I think it's been great, and thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Goodbye.
Hi.